Plan Committee. Several items on our agenda. We will receive presentations from relevant officers who I will call to present their item. Minutes. May I? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, I do have several apologies. Councillor Chittock, Councillor Wimfield, and I will add Councillor Allen to that. He may well be held up or not be able to get here. So, and Councillor Nash as well. Thank you very much. May I sign the minutes of the last meeting as a true record? That counts. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll do so. Yeah, thank you very much. Right, declarations of interest. Do I have any? I see no hands. No, thank you. Questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Do we have any?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you very much for support. Public speaking. Do I have any public speakers?
Bill Marshall did.
Welcome.
Chairman, Bill Marshall did say that he was going to attend to make a statement on item A1.
Yeah.
He's not arrived yet, but he may do before we get there.
If he does, he'll be very welcome to speak on it. Thank you. Item 6, a report of the Director of Planning, A1 Local Development Scheme 2023 to 2027. Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. The Local Development Scheme, the LDS, is a statutory document that the Council has to publish, which sets out the predicted timetable for producing the local plan and other related planning policy documents. It's a rolling project plan which gives an overview of what documents the Council intends to prepare, what the timescales might be for consultations and adopting the documents, and also outlines the evidence-based documents that are likely to be required. The LDS is updated regularly to reflect recent developments in the preparation of planning policy documents, and today's update is June 2021. So since the last update, we've adopted Section 2 of our local plan and made strides in the preparation of the Garden Communities DPD. As such, it's appropriate to publish an update now so that everybody with an interest in the preparation of planning policy documents, from members of the Council to landowners and developers, external organisations that we work with, such as the NHS and the County Council, and indeed members of the public, all have a clear idea of when the various stages of the preparation and consultation of planning policy documents are likely to take place. By publishing this document on the website, the information is available to anybody who wants to understand broadly when consultations are likely to happen, and they can prepare their resources accordingly. The document itself is in a fairly standard format, and it's a document that can be updated at any time to reflect changes that come about as these policy documents are prepared. Key points from this version of the Local Development Scheme are the review of the local plan, which needs to take place within 5 years of its adoption, and the preparation of the tendering Colchester Borders Garden Community DPD. The timetable for both of these are on pages 28 and 29 of your agenda. The local plan review involves similar stages of statutory consultation as the original local plan did, and the timetable accounts for each of these stages up to and including potential adoption in 2026. Similarly, the Garden Communities DPD must go through several stages of consultation before being submitted to the Secretary of State for examination, and the timetable currently forecasts this process to be completed around the end of this year. Although, as with the local plan, this is dependent not just on local factors, but also on the planning inspectorate and their capacity at the time the plan is submitted. On page 31 of your agenda, the LDS includes an overview of the evidence base that supports our local plan. Some of the documents are produced by the Council, and others are produced by our partner organisations, such as the Environment Agency. And it gives an indication of whether and when they might need to be reviewed. Some of this evidence, such as the housing needs assessments, will need to be updated to inform the review of the local plan. And some, such as conservation area appraisals, one of which will be discussed later in the agenda, are reviewed on their own timetable. In addition to the two key documents that I've mentioned, the LDS also sets out the supplementary planning documents the council are looking to produce, which comprise the Hartley Gardens SPD, the Jaywick Sands Design SPD, which will be discussed later in tonight's agenda, an Open Spaces SPD, and a Climate Change SPD. There are also 3 emerging neighbourhood plans, which are being produced by parish councils in the district, and each of those are at various stages of preparation: Elmsted Market, Ardleigh and Brightlingsea. The timetables for neighbourhood plans and the SPDs are on page 30 of your agenda. Of course, all of this is presented against the backdrop of the prospect of planning reform and the government's current consultation on a new MPPF and wider changes to the planning system does add an element of uncertainty to our timetable. Officers are currently working through how the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill might affect tendering, particularly looking at our local plan review and the implications to the timetable. The LDS that you've got in front of you was produced before the government's consultation documents were published, and in any case it reflects the projected timeframes under the current system that we operate within. But the LDS can be updated at any time, and so should changes to the planning system occur that will impact the preparation of our documents, then the LDS can be updated again in due course. So the LDS sets out when and how we would expect to review the local plan, when the Garden Communities DPD could be ready for adoption, the anticipated timeframes concerning 4 supplementary planning documents and 3 new neighbourhood plans, as well as the evidence base to support all of these documents. And the recommendation can be found on page 17 of your agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Any questions? Councillor Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Really, I would like to focus probably on the tendering Colchester Garden Communities particular element, because it's on that committee.
Could you direct us to which page you're on?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 28.
Thank you very much.
I'm just looking at that with these timetables, particularly with the reg document preparation for Reg 19, where we are with the timetable in view of recent meetings we've had. Are we comfortable with it in that target? I have noted that we are trying to agree another PPA along the way with the developer to actually support the resource to make certain we can achieve the EPD on them timescales. Is there any hidden issues here that may push this window of timescale back down the road? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Guyver.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Bush. Yes, I mean, as we approach the spring of 2023, we know we've got sort of big decisions that need to be taken within that time frame to allow this timetable to be achieved. The PPA with the developer, where that really comes into its own is when we're talking about the determination of the planning applications, which is a bit further up the road once the development plan document has been adopted. But we are also working collaboratively, and there's the opportunity for the developer to support the process with providing evidence that would feed into the examination as well. What the developer does in terms of that evidence and what the council is able to achieve doesn't affect the timetable for progressing this development plan document. The key things for this are making sure that the evidence that the council has commissioned is completed in time for the members of the joint committee and approve that documentation and then on to full council before submission to the Secretary of State. So any arrangement around planning performance agreements with the developer don't concern me in terms of the timetable for this, but they will be quite key when we get to the actual determination of the planning applications a bit later down the road. I mean, you'll be aware as a member of the Joint Committee that there's a lot of evidence being pulled together as we speak. that seeks to respond to some of the issues that were raised in the previous consultation, regulation 18 stage. We're confident that that will all be completed to ensure members are briefed and can take an informed decision on that in line with this timetable. The most uncertain element around this is going to be if we achieve this timetable, how long does the planning inspector need to examine the document and what issues they may have, which we would need to go back to. And it reminds me of section 1 of the local plan. Of course, it was quite a long period of time we were with the inspector going through the issues they had. So that's when it starts to get a bit more uncertain. But I think the timescales that have been put in here are based on the best available information we have at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Guyver. Councillor Bush, did you wish to
Thank
come
you for
back?
that, Mr. Guyver. Thank you.
Any other questions? The only thing I did look at, and I went through with Gary, was actually if you look at the documents here, the council wish to follow, the committee wish to follow the suggestions of the officers on some of these documents, and I think 1 or 2 need to be updated. It's on page. Oh, sorry, I'm working on 3 different levels of documentation here for it's about 10 and 11 onwards.
Yeah, page 29, Jim.
Yeah, thank you very much. So is anyone I'll take you through them then. Demographic and household projections. I've been assured that they're pretty accurate and up to speed and are kept up to speed. Yes.
Just for members'
Yeah.
benefit, that's on page 31.
Thank you, Ian. Double act. I told you we were. Councillor Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question really on page 29 regarding this CIL. Page 29,
Thank you.
which is the CIL charging schedule. Could you perhaps give us a bit of an overview and update where we are with tendering? Because some of it says it's parts of tendering, all the tendering, some of it's exempt. Could you perhaps give a bit of an explanation of where we're going to be going with that for future developments? Thank you.
Mr. Wood. Super. Thank you. Just chime in.
Thank you.
Chime in.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Bush. So the community infrastructure levy isn't something that we've implemented yet in tendering, in part because of the amount of resources and work that went into implement and preparing the local plan, and also the large number of housing sites in the district that already had planning permission with Section 106 agreements attached to them. However, now that the local plan is adopted, it's something that officers are considering to understand whether it would be a suitable method to select developer contributions on future planning applications. We've been speaking with officers from Essex County Council because they're responsible for a significant amount of the infrastructure that would traditionally be funded through Section 106 agreements. And they've also sort of been through the process of preparing a still charging schedule with other local authorities within the council as well. And so they have some expertise that they can give us advice with. But at this stage, we don't have a still charging schedule, and the timetable in the LDS is just an indicative overview of how long that process would take. And so once we have an update, then we can bring it before members of the community.
So a paper will be brought before us, will it?
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, if we just come back, so what we're suggesting, Chairman, what we're suggesting then is that the existing Section 106 contributions will be in force until at least the adoption of winter 2024. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct. We wouldn't stop entering into Section 106 agreements until a still charging schedule had been through examination and adopted. And that's something that we're in.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm going to page 31 and I am looking at the bottom item, and you've got Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment there saying that a further review has been commissioned. The last one was 2017-18. How long is, where are we with that? How long is it likely to take? When does that come up? And if there are changes put forward, how does that feed into goes for approval.
The Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment is a piece of work that previously has been commissioned jointly across Essex. So the authorities have commissioned the work together and then done an assessment that looks at Essex as a whole, but also then establishes the need for each of the different districts and boroughs within the county. So at the moment, we've commissioned the work jointly with the Essex Planning Officers Association, and I believe there's a meeting this week actually where we'll get an update on where that work is up to. I understand there are authorities in the county that are at different stages of their local plan preparation, and so for them to have an up-to-date assessment of the need in their district is more pressing, whereas where we have adopted our local plan very recently, and we're not looking to review that until until the 5-year period where that review needs to take place. And so we're a little bit lower down the priority just because of the fact that we've adopted our local plan. Our need is established there.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you, Councillor Kelly. That's lovely, thank you. Next page, 32. Thank you. The only one I saw there that interests us, I think this might interest you, Councillor Allen, is the penultimate one there, Walton on Ace Regeneration Framework, last carried out in January 2010. I would suggest that needs an update, in particular because I do believe that the Walton has changed for the better over that period of 12 years. And I think it should somehow be recognised in the paper. Councillor Allen?
Yes, I agree, Chairman. As I say, there's been massive changes in Walton on the days. And what with the new housing going in there, we need to make the existing people realise what some gems they've got amongst the properties there.
Yeah.
And also, I think this council needs to go and have a word with some of the owners of these properties, because there are properties there that should be done up and could be done up and put right. It's just been left to just dilapidate.
Well, we could possibly do that through a neighbourhood plan, Councillor Allen.
Well, I would agree, but then your government's minister is notice of Mr. Gove.
Anyway, thank you. Moving on. Anybody else got any other comments on that page? Next page, 33. The one I do disagree with on here is the Haven Gateway Water Cycle Study. Again, it was done in 2009. No imminent need to review. I think there's a massive need to review this. The water companies are playing fast and loose with this country. I still don't, and we still haven't got any UV test, UV of the discharge from the sewage treatment works or water recycling centres, as they now like to euphemistically call them. I would like to know why. I've been trying to find out exactly what are the latest and best treatments for foul and grey water. And I'm sure that we are well behind the curve here of technology in the tendering. And a lot more could be done. And therefore, I would suggest a review there if that's acceptable to the committee. Councillor Allen?
Yes, Chairman. Once again, I agree with you. Is this
Please minute.
please minute? Yeah. But as I say, this council sells itself as a tourism, especially over the last few years. They've really been pushing that we're for tourism there. And what prevents people to come is when they hear funny things floating in the water, where they want to go and bathe. So, as I say, you've got to start
Well, one thing
people in the eye to get them to work. I'm sorry, but my colloquial language,
Yes.
but I didn't go to university like our officers, and I'm sure they can put it in a much better way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Fairley.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also agree with that. And then further down on that page where you're looking at the Essex and South Suffolk Shoreline Management Plan, completed in 2012, review already being undertaken by the Environment Agency working with its partners. Where is that at this point in time, please?
Mr. Guyver, would you like me to go on that?
Actually, Chairman, I mean, you're as up to speed as I am on that. We know that work has been carried out on that, and a lot of meetings that the authority has been involved with to try and sort of influence the approach that's taken in and updated shoreline management plan. What we tend to do in the context of the local plan is a separate process and a separate document, but we have to ensure that it's compatible with what we're doing in the local plan. So you will see references to it in our new local plan. And of course, when we come to review the local plan, we'll need to ensure that we've taken into account the very latest version of this shoreline management plan, and that we take the opportunities to influence what goes in that plan ourselves as well. It's a two-way process. In terms of where the actual document is in the review process, I think there had been some significant progress for a while, and I don't think we really had any. Councillor Turley, you may be more aware of the situation than I am, but things, from my perspective, have ground to a little bit of a halt. But you may be privy to more information than I am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guy. But yes, just on, I haven't, somehow along the line, I was asked whether I agreed to it or not, and I didn't. Mainly because from Holland Haven through to Frinton, and if you care to check, and I would suggest all of you check the flood planning map that's put out by the Environment Agency. It's very easy to find on their website. It is horrifying. For instance, Councillor Fowler, Parkston becomes an island. I will have the sea lapping at my front door. It will go up. It won't go up Pickersditch, because I gather they are actually going to hold the line along that. But normally it was going to go up Pickersditch. Great Holland will be able to become a small port again. The cricket club probably won't go, but the other sporting clubs will all go. And certainly the first half a dozen, three to four houses opposite me, that's on the west side of 2nd Avenue from the seafront upwards, will go. We'll have water inundation. And this is up from 2055 onwards, because the Environment Agency are only saying they will hold the line or manage retreat. They will not just hold the line, which means maintain the sea defences along there. And so for that reason, I have refused it. And I've been doing this consistently and constantly since 2009, when I first became aware of the SMP. There is no need for it. There's no need for it. There's nothing there. And so that is where the impasse is at the moment. I'm hoping we'll have a better update of that at the Naze Management Board, to be held at on the 23rd of February at the Essex Wildlife Centre on the Naze, where I do know there will be an officer from the Environment Agency in attendance, and I will certainly give them a heads up in all fairness, so that we can, because it is of massive importance to this district. And I'm Brightlingsea, by the way. Unless you're at the top, you've gone. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it is incredibly important to this council, or whatever form it takes in the years to come, that certain areas are maintained to eat. Sorry, for those who don't know, there's 3 epochs: 2005 to 225, 225 to 255, and 255 to 2110 or 105. They never quite make their minds up over those 5 years. And we're okay to the end of 2055, but thereafter they're not intending. They may not. Now I rephrase that. They may not maintain the seawalls, and I don't see any reason for what not doing so. I don't see any need. And I'm sure through SIL and other ways and innovations that we can certainly help find the finances for it. But anyway, at the end of my little diatribe on that, Councillor Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just carrying on from what you just said there. If we revert back to page 30, if we may, on his supplementary planning documents under climate change, the SPD, so we're saying that potential adoption autumn 2023. Will what Councillor Turner said be included part of that in the policy, looking at not just climate change, but obviously the impacts of sea defences and all aspects of that, which will have an impact on our environment locally because of the nature of our geography. And on that note, I feel that we perhaps should have a more of a focus to actually make certain we hit that target of autumn. What leeway do we have if we don't? It's something really we shouldn't take off the ball, in my opinion. It's so important. We are seeing those changes of climate change around us literally every day now. And I just feel that I'd feel more comfortable if there was a more accurate target date that we'd hit with that, if that was possible. Thank you.
Would that be you, Mr. Guyver? Thank you, Mr. Guyver.
Thank you, Chair. No, thank you, Councillor Bush. I mean, this is one area of work where we are still scoping out what it will need to cover. The intended purpose of it is really to, because it's a supplementary planning document, is to supplement the policy we have in the local plan about tackling climate change, achieving energy efficiency, insulation levels, and enabling a bit more guidance, a bit more information to be provided on the implementation of that policy so that we get the best from that policy. At the moment, and I have discussed this with councillors and officers, although we have the policy, interpreting it, people have interpreted it in different ways and tried to come up with a variety of different solutions. Having a supplementary planning document gives us the opportunity to really beef up some of those areas and provide a bit more clarity that we haven't got at the moment. We will have to look very carefully at resourcing this going forward. And the reason why I say that is that the world is changing so quickly in terms of the technologies that are available. We're finding that when we're speaking to certain developers, actually they're introducing ideas to the officers that we weren't aware of. The innovation is happening in the construction industry, and being able to pin it down, it's like trying to nail the jelly to the wall. Hence why we perhaps haven't progressed that as much as some of the other things to date. I think we'll have to look. I mean, I would suggest we stick with as vague as autumn 2023 for now, because I think there's still a lot of scoping work to be done on this to make sure that the product we produce is fit for purpose and does what this authority needs it to do.
Yeah, can I just come back with that, Chairman, if I may? Are we allocating a direct resource for that particular policy, or is it a part of someone else's multifunctional role, Mr. Guyver?
As it stands at the moment, we are looking to develop something internally, but we have the option of getting external support for elements of that. But it will be clearer once we've got a clear scope for what that document's going to cover. And if there are areas in it that are technical and sort of beyond the knowledge of council employees and our partners, then we'll bring external support in for that.
Maybe keep this as an agenda item or as an aid memoir for each meeting, just to be, you can just update us on where you're at or when you think that you can produce something. Yeah, without, just so we keep the pot boiling. Thank you. Right, that's at 34. Thank you very much. On that one. There's nothing I have on the next page. Does anyone else have anything on that? Councillor Allen?
I want to make a comment.
Sorry, I do apologise.
You've missed me. I mean, it's not like you.
I know. Sorry, my apologies.
No, really, it wasn't a comment more than a question. Is to see these stories or these particular incidents that you say can happen, is make enormous effects on the lives of the people on the coastal areas. Because if you remember, every year when you sign your house insurance form, they say, how far are you from water? Are you in the front? Now, if they start bringing out pictures, like you say, marked in yellow or whatever they mark them in, we're all going to be under that. So one thing, you wouldn't get insurance for flood, and the other thing, it'd be sky high. And if you think about it, say the low areas of where I live, I can only say to my town, really, and up in places in Walton, there is areas there. If there was a slight break in that wall and it flooded, it would be an island. The Naze would be an island. How wide is that? 30 metres?
Yeah.
20 metres wide between that and the backwaters?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Is it true, or are they just speculating with these figures?
No, it's true. I've fought them every way up to national level over this SMP for the last 3 years. I've raised it in Westminster. I've raised it at county, ad nauseum. I've raised it at district and I've raised it at town. I don't think I can go much further, really. Councillor, sorry, I'm elevating you yet again, Mr. Guyver. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Promotion. I'm grateful. It's an interesting point that Councillor Allen raises, because yes, the projections of sea level rise and how they could affect different areas have to be dealt with very sensitively. I mean, these are projections that take us sort of 100 years into the future, potentially, but they serve a couple of purposes. One is, they really sort of bring home the importance of having policies that respond to climate change, because if there was do nothing approach, that kind of rate of sea rise could increase over time, but it also allows us to plan for the future. And although we're not necessarily saying that these kind of things are going to happen sort of in the next few years, you have to start planning for that change. And national policy on flood risk and planning is very much about trying to implement things or put the building blocks in place now, bearing in mind what we know could happen in the long term. So although it's sensitive and quite sort of frightening if you see some of the predictions, we need to have that information so that we can take an informed approach to how we do planning. Extremely relevant to a couple of the items we'll be discussing later around flood risk as well.
Just to follow on, I was informed that the house in front of me did not sell because of that map. There's some bright spark in some solicitor's office actually did his job properly and discovered it, and then advised his client not to purchase it. How true it is, I don't know, but that one. So that was 2 or 3 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago actually. Right, next page. Jaywick Strategic Floods Study. I presume we're pretty well up to date on that, aren't we? Or are we?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, what we'll look to do with a lot of these studies, including that one, is that we do the update when it's going to provide the most useful piece of information for the review and update of the local plan. So the timing of a lot of these will coincide with key stages of the local plan process going forward. And
this is particular to Councillor Fowler, as the Harwich Strategic Flood Risk Assessment. Sorry, page 34, second one down, Councillor Fowler. Yeah, this is particularly pertinent for you, I'd have thought.
Yeah. Sorry, Chairman, I did look at that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. You happy with no immediate need for review?
It's not imminent though, is it? I don't believe.
No, not imminent need. The last one was done 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
No problem.
Fine. Any other ones? Sorry, Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really just a general comment in relation to where there is comments such as no imminent need for review or consider review. When you're saying no imminent need for review, do you have something in mind for those ones that could be clarified a little bit more? And where you're getting in there and you're putting like the landscape character assessment, for example, and you've got consider review, does that mean that we are considering review, or you're suggesting that we need to say whether review needs doing?
No, you're quite right. Sorry, Mr. Guyver, please.
Thank you. No, I understand very well the point that's being made there. Yes, when we say no imminent need for review, yes, that could probably be more helpfully clarified, and we're happy to consider some alterations to the wording just to make it clear that we're always considering the need for review, but very often the most pertinent time is in relation to when you're updating the local plan. So if we were to perhaps put some wording in there that made that clearer, perhaps no imminent need for review, but we'll consider the need for review alongside the local plan review, something along those lines. I'm sure Paul we'll be able to sort of come up with some wording that covers that. It may well be that that could address that concern.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that when I read through, I think, yeah, things like that, it just felt a little bit woolly. I wasn't quite sure where we were at. So, yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't put my microphone on. I have the recording. Do I need to say that again? Yeah, I was just saying, I noticed on the open space sport and recreation strategy many years ago, I couldn't understand why we were so short of open space, certainly in my area. And when we got all our lovely beaches, and I gather they weren't included in open space, which doesn't make any sense to us who live there because the amount of people that turn up to play on them. So I did speak with Mr. Guyver before the meeting on all this, and he informed me that beaches are now, you can play on our beaches, despite what Churchill said.
So to provide a bit of clarity on that, Chairman, yes, these studies do take into account the beaches and the greenswards and the sort of unique assets that this district has in terms of recreational space. But the way that these studies are done is that they categorise spaces by their use. So those kind of things might be classed as sort of informal or semi-natural spaces, but also these assessments look at, well, how much would you need in terms of formal football pitches? And of course, you wouldn't have a formal football pitch on the beach necessarily, and it's sort of a sort of beach football tournament. The tide would wash it away. But yeah, certainly in the context of that sort of semi-natural informal green space, then our district performs very well.
Mr. Guyver, Councillor Allen.
Just say it was hard to believe because if you think about it, each one of our residents has got a hectare to play on. We're 145,000 hectares tendering. We're around about 145,000 population, give or take. So, with respect to the farmers, of course, Councillor Fairley.
Not on her land.
Get shocked.
Yes, yeah. Right. You're very welcome, but you will be shot. Thank you. Right, the final one, viability testing. I had no problems there. The rest of the paper, any other comments? No. Then I'm going to bring in at this stage, I'll do it as we get to each agenda item, whether the portfolio holder, Councillor Bray, would like to make any comments.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I really don't have very many comments to make. I think the report's been extremely well written. The timescales are quite clear. I accept immediately your comments in relation to beach defences. I think we sing from the same hymn sheet there. But overall, I think it's an excellent report. It's been well put together. It's clear. It could be clearer, as Councillor Fairley has pointed out, if it's written slightly differently. So we've already said we'll look at that. So no, I'm quite comfortable if you are, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor White, did you have any questions from your committee on this paper? Thank you very much indeed. That being the case, I'd like to move to the recommendation that the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee approves the updated Local Development Scheme LDS 2023 to 2027 as attached as Appendix 1 for the publication on the Council's website. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Bush. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fairley. So moved. Oh, with all those in favour, better say. Thank you, unanimous. Thank you very much. Never assume. Right, that's that one done. Right, item 7. A report of the Director of Planning, Jaywick Sands Place Plan Consultation Report, pages 43 to 68. And Mr. Guyver will lead on to this. And then welcome to Miss Loftus, who will be following through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this is one of two reports tonight that relate to the work that's been done in Jaywick Sands. And you'll recall from a meeting last year where we brought forward some information in draft to carry out consultation with the local community. Well, that consultation was carried out last year. And the first of the two reports just gives an overview of some of the comments that were received from the people that we met or participated in the consultation, and all of the feedback and information that we took from that exercise will be informing the next stages of work on a place plan strategy for the Jaywick Sands area to help bring about rejuvenation in the area. And later, the report that will come after this one relates more specifically to a supplementary planning document that has been prepared and where the comments have been taken into account. But on this one, I'm very happy to welcome Hannah Loftus from Hack Projects, who was the lead consultancy doing this work and was out in the community meeting and talking to people as well about their hopes and fears for the future. And I'd like to invite Hannah to just talk through the report and some of the findings from the consultation.
Ms. Loftus.
Thank you very much. So as Gary mentioned, we held consultation in autumn last year. We had, I think, just about started the consultation when we received the sad news of Her Majesty the Queen's passing. So we did have a little bit of a delay in the early part of the consultation and had to reschedule some events due to the period of mourning. But we did manage to reschedule them all successfully and hold the rest of the consultation period, which was extended as a result to ensure that everybody had the chance to participate. As Gary mentioned, we consulted on both the wider place plan strategy and also more specifically on the supplementary planning document of the Jaywick Sands Design Guide. The consultation therefore formed informal consultation on the place plan as a whole and formal, that is to say, statutory consultation under the planning regulations for the design guide, but we decided to combine the two consultations because obviously they are related, and also to ensure that members of the community didn't have to come to lots of different events not quite knowing which might be which, so it made sense to combine the two together. The tendering local plan sets out very clearly the regeneration aims for Jaywick Sands, but also, and very importantly, sets out that this has to be founded in an understanding of what the local community living in Jaywick Sands would like to see happen there and what their priorities are. And I think it's commendable that the local plan policy and the justification for it sets out that very clearly, because for us as consultants, that really helps us to know that we do need to take genuine account of what the local community experience in their day-to-day life in Jaywick Sands, what they see their most pressing challenges are, and how they would like the council to address that. We structured the consultation around a few themes and questions. Firstly, there was general perceptions of Jaywick Sands, so what people appreciated, what people felt didn't work in Jaywick, what they liked, what they don't like. Housing, we know that that's a big issue around housing quality, both for rented properties particularly, but also for some owner-occupied properties as well. Flood risk, which we've already heard a lot about this evening, clearly one of the biggest long-term challenges facing Jaywick Sands. Streets and open spaces, again, we hear a lot about the quality of the physical environment, the open spaces, and how important that is to people's sense of pride and well-being in Jaywick Sands. Shops and services, because that was another theme that had emerged from previous consultation with many local stakeholders, some of the lack of basic everyday services in the community. And lastly, design and character, which links to the Design Guide SPD. I won't summarise the report that I'm sure you've all read, but I think just to pick out a few items of note really that we look to build on as we then go forward now to develop the draft place plan and to confirm the process that's set out in the report. That draft place plan will then go back to the community for consultation again. So this is very much not the end of that consultation process. There will be ongoing informal consultation with stakeholders as we develop the draft plan, but then there will be full and formal public consultation on that, which will really be saying, this is what we heard last time round, this is how we've shaped the strategy in response. Have we got that right? Did we misunderstand anything? Is there anything that people feel should be in that plan that isn't in that plan, or is in the plan that shouldn't be? But some of the things that we heard very strongly was around the love that many residents have for Jaywick Sands as a place, and some of the aspects of Jaywick Sands that they do really appreciate. So obviously the beach, being able to live by the sea is a wonderful blessing that many people in Tendring have, and Jaywick Sands, you know, arguably has the best beach in the district. And also the sense of community and character. Jaywick Sands has a very unique history as a plotland settlement, very unique physical character as a result, and a very unique community character too. And whilst sometimes the negatives are unduly focused upon externally, it's very clear within the community that many positives are seen, and that the community by and large wishes to see those positive characteristics retained and enhanced going forward. We did get some useful feedback on some other aspects of the potential plan going forward, most notably that I think there is some reservations within the community about building substantive quantities of new housing in the community. I think there is a sense that that may not really be the solution to some of the issues with the existing homes, and linking those together is seen as a priority. So linking the regeneration or the betterment of existing homes to any new development is really important, but that has been difficult to achieve in the past. So a little bit of work needed to be done to understand what models are viable and feasible to link that regeneration to any new housing. We did consult on a wide range. Those of you who, I remember we were at this meeting, weren't we, before, when we're coming up to consultation, we consulted on a wide range of options, some of which had essentially been ruled out, screened out by the officers and lead members and so forth at an earlier stage. But I think were reassured to see that the community were not sort of asking us to bring them back to the table. So there were not people saying, you know, please build lots and lots of new homes on Tudor Fields, for example. That was an option that had been ruled out. And likewise, though not surprisingly, we didn't have people saying, please do a whole-scale kind of comprehensive redevelopment of Jaywick Sands as a community. So I think that was really reassuring to hear that, broadly speaking, the options that had already been ruled out were the right ones to rule out from a community perspective going forward. Just worth noting that we did also get some statutory consultation feedbacks from statutory consultees. So that would include the Environment Agency. We also heard from the Fire and Rescue Service, and we also had a late but welcome contribution from the NHS. And those are really useful as well. I think it's worth members noting that the Environment Agency has commented that it is not supportive of a strategy that involves a net increase in population within Jaywick Sands. To explain what they mean by that a little bit, their concern is that even if flood defences are improved over time, there remains a residual risk. You can never get rid of the risk of flooding entirely. You could still have a catastrophic event. You could have a breach event, or you could have a really, really bad, 1 in 1,000 type storm. And that could result in very, very significant levels of flooding in Jaywick Sands, from which people would need to be rescued. they don't feel that they would support increasing the number of people that would need to be rescued from Jaywick Sands in an emergency situation, because the depths of the floodwater would be so great in the future and the means of escape out of Jaywick Sands are quite limited and would also be underwater very quickly. It's worth noticing that the Fire and Rescue Service raised a very, very similar comment in their consultation response as well. However, the Environment Agency is very supportive of regeneration in Jaywick Sands because they do see that as a way of making people safer over time. They do absolutely want to see the quality of homes in Jaywick Sand improved so that they are safer. You know, I think they would say there's no such thing as safe in a flood zone, but you can definitely make people safer. And that is certainly something that they have expressed in their consultation response that they wish to see. I hope that is sort of helpful in clarifying that, which I can imagine is something that members may well have sort of picked up on. I'm mindful I've been speaking for about 9 minutes now, as my little clock tells me, so that might be enough for you, but I'm very happy to answer any questions about what the next steps will be.
Thank you very much, Ms. Loftus. Councillor Fairley.
Yes, thank you. That was really interesting. And actually, you mentioned specifically one of the concerns that I wanted clarification on was the Environment Agency response. And really, it was to clarify that point and say, well, actually, what does that look like in practice then for the future of Jaywick Sands?
What the Environment Agency would like to see is existing homes replaced with better quality homes where the existing homes are not flood safe. But what they wouldn't like to see is additional new homes, so a net increase. So essentially a one-to-one replacement where you're replacing the homes that already exist there with homes that are rebuilt to better quality standards they are comfortable with, but they're not comfortable with introducing large numbers of additional people into Jaywick Sands. So it would have to be more of a sort of rolling programme, if you like, of improvement in Jaywick Sands rather than running the risk that you might build a substantive quantity of new homes, but they wouldn't actually be used to rehouse existing residents. You'd still have the old homes sitting there in poor quality and putting people at risk. Thank you.
Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Allen.
Yes. Well, it's like deja vu. Road to Damascus. This 2005 onwards, 5, 6, 7. It was a really good plan for that, because it all relied on is when I'm talking about new homes and not replacing, and it depended on if you produced a new house, you moved the people out and you knocked that one down, because what was happening is the same happened at Peabody. We moved all the people out and they just moved another lot in, which just exacerbated the problem. Cool, where'd that come from? So that's it. We keep going around with consultations, this, that. God knows how much money has been spent in the last 15 years on this, on all these different consultants. Go back to that plan, look at it, and just enact it, because it costs money, and it was the only time that all the different agencies actually said, right, we haven't got a pot for this, a pot for that. It was the Jaywick pot, and that money was going to be done. Then we had the election, and someone sort of, I'm not going into that, but it all got pushed to one side. And but you can't keep tittering with it. That's what you've got to do, is build enough for one row of them houses, move them out, knock that down as soon as they move the last bit of furniture, because that's what's happening. And it would take the council buying that old property, providing one, and then giving the owners options. You can either rent it, buy it, or part buy it. And that way it satisfies all those questions that these people, oh, I don't want to buy a house, or I want to buy a house, or I want to leave something to but I can't afford a house, but I would like to leave something to my relatives and children, and that would satisfy them free. And the plans have been there, probably on a microfiche somewhere in a cupboard. But it's all, we read this and give people hope all the time. But that hope's been there since, what, 15 years? It's still not happening. Sorry to bring this up, Chairman.
No, not
but,
at all.
You know, it's a case of been there, done it. And, you know, I'm waiting for my T-shirt that Jaywick needed something.
No, I
Thank
don't
you.
disagree, Councillor Allen. We've been around this time and time again. What I would like to say and ask your company, Ms Loftus, is there's been plenty of money spent on these consultations. And I notice only 115 turned up to 3 public meetings. Couldn't quite work out exactly what was online, what wasn't online, what was partial, what was private. So I'm going to go with 3. We as councillors, and particularly with May rushing down on us, know how to reach our ward residents. That is by a survey with a post-reply envelope. I can tell you that the Conservatives are achieving a return of well over 20% and upwards up to nearly 50%. That together with other initiatives would present a rather better evidence base. I do not trust this evidence base. And I didn't see the questions. Well, this committee didn't see the questions. If it did, kindly remind me. I've forgotten. So I do question that, the evidence base. We've had this, by the way, something very similar on another project that Mr. Guyborough and Councillor Bush and I are working on elsewhere. And I've been querying the same reaction. So easy to do all this. It's tried and tested and it doesn't work. You know, if you go out and people in the privacy of their homes and anonymously can fill out, you get a much better result. And we as councillors know that, and we won't go to the polls without knowing sure our evidence base is as best as possible, because we don't like a public beating. So that's one point. As regards the Environment Agency, yes, that's a bombshell. And obviously it needs to be, we need to look at that very seriously, and then obviously it'll have to either revise our policy, this council's policy on Jaywick, or look for other ways of dealing with it so that it can be done. Councillor, and I say in my little saying, but I really do say in future, go out with post-replied envelope and deliver. It's a lot cheaper, by the way, a lot cheaper. Councillor Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was carry on brief from what Councillor Allen said. Yeah, this evidence report, it says a lot and don't say a lot, but also, you know, when I look at it, and the residents don't see the flood risk as the major issue in their community. It's quite amazing, really. But the purpose or the point I would like to make, I mean, and as Councillor Allen said, a lot of money has been spent on this. I'd like to see where the appetite comes from the development of this. You know, if we talk about knocking properties down, building all different options, we've got to look at the development appetite. And when you've got the Environmental Agency basically giving you no confidence, it's just saying, oh, don't increase the population, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence to invest money in there. If you're a developer, you'd look at that massive risk. And if you're looking at that risk, you say, well, okay, what sort of properties we've got to build to becoming sort of like almost flood free, other than having houseboats? I mean, we should, you know, I don't know where they would go, because the cost of building these properties, I can't see the payback or the appetite. Have we looked and spoken to commercial developers working in areas around a coastal area to get a feel of where they are and get some sort of feedback from that? Because otherwise, as Councillor Allen said, we're going around in circles. We're not going anywhere. There's a lot of false hope for people that are living in Jaywick, and I don't see an outcome. I don't. Sorry about that.
I don't apologise, Councillor Bush. That's your comment. Any other comment? No. Well, would the officers like to comment on anything?
Thank you. I'll just respond to a few of those points, and Hannah, if you want to add anything, give me the nod. But very well understood. I mean, from my 21 years of tendering now, can you believe that? I have seen the different ideas and attempts at bringing about a regeneration plan for Jaywick Sands. And the sticking point has always been how do you work with the community to make change happen without damaging the community? Some of the more radical options that have been considered years and years ago would have sort of wiped out the community aspect of that area. And what is economically viable to achieve? Now, some of the problems that we had with the policies going back 15 years ago is that on paper they were good policies. Because what they would have resulted in is a form of housing which is not resilient to flood, being swapped over for a more flood resilient property, and using the kind of models that Councillor Allen described there. As long as you don't allow the old properties to then be refilled by people, there's a solution there. The funding was always the issue, and the viability, because to build in that location to a standard where it's resilient, there's a substantial cost involved, and the properties in terms of their value are just a bit lower than you might find elsewhere. So that viability gap has always been an issue there. Although we've sort of gone around the houses a bit with different strategies over the years, I think what we haven't managed to do in the past is acknowledge that whatever you come up with, there's going to be some kind of viability issue that needs to be dealt with, whether you're looking at buying up property, whether you're looking at building lots of more houses. So the two extreme scenarios, there's always going to be a viability issue, or something that's somewhere in the middle, which is a bit more incremental, achieved over a longer period of time, bit by bit, in line with the design guide that we're going to talk about later. But even with that, there is still a gap in the viability. What we haven't had in the past is to actually go to government and other funders and say, well, this is the strategy, and this is how much it's going to cost to deliver. We've always sort of fallen short of that last bit. So whilst we've over the years been able to bring officials down from Westminster and walk them around Jaywick Sands and show them all the efforts that the council and its partners are trying to do to make the conditions better for people down there, the conversation is all very interesting. Yes, we do need to do something about this, but unless you've got a strategy and some figures behind it which tell you what's going to deliver that strategy and how long it's going to take, that bus goes back to Westminster and you never hear from them again until the next bus of Westminster officials come down to have a look round. So that's the cycle we want to break now, is we want to actually bring in place a strategy that doesn't destroy the community, addresses the flood risk issues, working with the Environment Agency on that, but ultimately will come with a price tag that we can actually speak to investors, whether they be private sector or public sector or government officials, and say, look, this is realistically what we can achieve over this period of time. Can you support us on that? And that's the bit of the jigsaw that we've been missing. It's on its way.
Sorry,
Hey, microphone on, please.
I was being rude and interrupted him.
It is being recorded and it is being broadcast. That's the word I wanted. Broadcast, yes.
I would have come.
No, you are on camera at the moment, Councillor Allen. Smile sweetly.
Right. Can I just say or ask, how did we buy all our council houses back? Borrowed the money, right? So they're all, we've got no damn, they're ours. We got them on one of those government loans. Well, why can't we think of the same to do this? Because if we put up enough, right, and do that first bit, because all you need to do is the first lot, and you won't destroy the community, because the community will be moving probably a few yards that way to the new housing for that. And the original scheme was when we had the Environmental Development Agency come down, And before we left the car park, he'd give this council £150,000 to buy that big square behind the yacht, behind the community place.
Yeah.
Right? And that was that. We buy that, and that would have been the first bit of development there. Build that, build the houses there, and then say to the people, would you like one of them instead of living there? And you could have it on the same terms. You rent, part rent, or buy. And that. And these were all houses that were the design of them was with the living on the first and second floor. Everything was done because the officers did it. They know what was needed. And that was it. But it was probably one television interview, and that all went.
Thank you very much for reminding us of that, Councillor Allen. Thank you very much for reminding us of that. One of the joys of spending many years on the council. Councillor Chapman.
Going to the Environment Agency's report, it stresses it won't support any net increase of population, which nowhere is it saying it won't support any extra buildings. It's saying population all the time. Now, it's your population doesn't have to necessarily increase that high. You know, it's my children growing up and wanting a house. So I'm finding this a little bit muddly, if you like, because it's stressing they won't support any net increase of population. Will they support extra housing, which we know we need, but our own children and families need? It's not increasing that population.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Mr. Guyver.
Thank you. And I mean, Hannah may have a view on this as well, because I know you're sort of more directly speaking to those concerned. But from my experience of working with the Environment Agency on this and their interpretation of what they mean by no net increase in population, is that they would be concerned about developments that have the potential to give rise to an increase in population. So unless there's a strategy behind it which is going to remove population from different parts of the area, which is why sort of Hannah mentioned actually the one-for-one approach. If you're going to lose a developed house, of course rebuilding it is fine because that's not really a net change in the potential to occupy people, but they do really equate increase in residential development with a potential increase in population. And the problem with measuring population is, of course, it can go up and down on a daily basis, can't it? At least you can count houses. Very difficult to count people because they're in and out and going around all over the place. But that's what the Environment Agency's position is. Any development that would bring about a net increase in population or be likely to is what concerns them.
Happy with that, Councillor Chapman. Thank you. Councillor Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can we just go back to, we talk about viability, economic viability. Now, we built those 8 houses, what they were down in Jaywick on stilts. If we drilled into that, scrutinised that, the viability and the outcome of where that is it a viable process? Is it a viable strategy or not? I mean, I'm just talking, we've cut this prototype. I'm not going to leading question here, but a prototype of this is the type of property that may be to overcome initial flood issues. What was the cost of building them? What's the payback return? Some of them are rented, I know, some are locked for sale. I'd like some feedback to see what we see as an economic or not an economic solution.
We've just done it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not in a position to provide sort of figures now. It's something we can look at feedback. I don't know, Hannah, whether you want to pick up on sort of your observations on the viability issues in.
Yes, we have, as part of our team, had people looking at viability, so economic consultants and developers, contacts and so forth. So we have looked at that. The simple fact is, broadly put, no, it's not viable in conventional models to develop housing in Jaywick Sands because the costs far exceed the values at this point in time. The more complicated answer to that is the bit that says at this point in time, because of course there are many other costs, hidden costs, if you like, to the situation in Jaywick Sands and what that costs the public purse. And there are also many opportunities that could come the way of Jaywick Sands if conditions were improved. So there are health costs, there are economic inactivity costs, there are all sorts of costs that occur to the public sector within Jaywick Sands as a result of people living in overcrowded accommodation that's unsuitable and so forth. And I suppose the aim of all regeneration is ultimately to increase economic opportunity, to increase employment, increase social outcomes. And actually, in a place like Jaywick, whilst in other parts of the country one might say that raising property values is not a desirable outcome, actually in the case of Jaywick Sands, an increase in property values would bear witness to that regeneration having been in some way successful, because actually you'd be taking a place that currently sits at low values because it's relatively undesirable in the market to somewhere where people would say, actually, I really want to live here, I really want to set up my business here, I see a lot of opportunity. So the work that we're doing, and we will be doing over the next stages on that viability assessment, is actually looking at the long term. What is the long-term return on investment in Jaywick Sands, taking into account everything we hopefully know about what may happen, and what the value increase may be in the long term? Because actually, for a long-term investor, whether that is public or private, you're not going to make money in the short term, but in the 20, 30, 40-year horizon, you may well start to see that investment really repaid. And then it will be the job of our team to advise the council and officers and members on what we think the most feasible and viable outcome is. But I think to the point you made earlier, Councillor Bush, around the flood defences, we've identified that to officers as the major risk here, because you're absolutely right, who, public or private, would want to make major investments in an area without certainty over the investment coming down the line to safeguard the flood defences. And I do think that that's something that we are obviously trying to work with officers and members on, in terms of how we communicate that to the Environment Agency and DEFRA and so forth. Because currently, I think, as members are aware, the current position of the Environment Agency is that funding is not yet ring-fenced, allocated for Jaywick Sands, and may not be for a number of years. So that's going to be one of the challenges that we are working through, because to make that model work, to make that viability model work, everybody does need to have that certainty, don't they, that that investment isn't going to be threatened going forward. And that probably be one of the major bits in the next stage of work that we're working with Gary and the team on.
Thank you very much, Ms. Loftus. Any other comments? No. Before I go to the recommendation, I'll take Councillor White, then I'll take Councillor Bray. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that. The point I'd like to make, and I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Allen, that this is a good report, and it's got back to the members of Jaywick, and they've got a very close community there. And it would be a shame, whatever we do, to try and break up that community. However, we're 7 days away, and 7 days and 70 years since the 1953 flood, when it wasn't the seawall that gave up, it was the seawall that broke up the complete length from Point Clear right through to Jaywick. That was why, when the police were watching whether the tide overtopped it or not, it didn't overtop, other than the bit of splashing. It all came round the back, and that is what caused the loss of life of 35 people. They were caught unawares. Now, somehow we've got to get that message across to the good folk at Jaywick, because even when we last time tried to evacuate that area, the police went round to all the properties, and a very large percentage of them said, well, it hasn't happened, so we won't bother, we won't move out. Now, what can you do with a population like that. One of the little things that we could do if we had the right powers, we could say to planning applications for those folk there, they don't have GDOs on their property. They can't just willy-nilly extend the property. They've got to build at least a second story on the property. So there is a means of escape. That was what saved two people in St. Joseph in '53, because they got up into the roof space and waited to be rescued. Now, as far as I can see, if the tide came through either from the back or overtopped the seawall, what in fact would happen, the seawall's now been raised a bit further, so we won't be in 7 or 8 foot of water, we'll be in a minimum of 10 foot of water. And so it's absolutely frightening. Members will know that we've taken action at Point Clear as best we can within the guise of what planning inspectors would allow us to do. And we're now looking at possibility of St. Joseph Beach. But I just remind members, the flood level at Point Clear and the flood level at St. Joseph Beach is the same depth that it would be if it overtopped at Jaywick. So we're trying to take action, and yet we're taking action at Point Clear, St. Joseph Beach, and yet here we are at Jaywick, and we're saying, well, as long as you stop there and we don't increase the population, you'll be all right. You will not be all right. There will be another flood, and by gosh, it's going to be disastrous. So yeah, I think the report is a good one, but so have other reports that we've had in the past few years, where we've all tried to do something. The Environment Agency might look as if they're coming off the shelf and say, well, we don't want to see any more population there. But I'm sorry, Chairman, I carry on a bit, but it's a subject very
unlike
dear to
your
my
committee, you're very welcome to continue.
Thank you.
I don't work to time. The hardest job is to get everybody here, let alone curtail them. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Chairman. And I do echo some of what Councillor White has just said. Clearly, this is an area that has a flood issue. We're aware of that, and it's a serious flood issue. And one of the most concerning things here is one of the responses we got suggested that quite a number of people who live in Jaywick don't see it as a serious issue, and that's a little bit of a concern. Going back to something you said yourself earlier, Chairman, I'm incredibly disappointed by the response to the consultation, which is really, really low. And the comment you made, and we do it, we send out a survey with a prepaid envelope and we get returns in the region of 15 to 20%. And this, I don't think, is very close to 15 to 20%. I'm really disappointed with the level of responses. However, the quality of responses is a little better, so I'll give it that. And they are quite detailed. And we've got some very, very interesting comments, which I think we should take on board. So aside of the flooding issue and the Environment Agency's position at the moment, which I note officers will continue to discuss, and maybe there will be ways forward with that. Aside from that, the comments from the people are really important. We've mentioned community many times, and Jaywick is unique. I don't think there's anywhere quite like it anywhere else. It's unique because of its position, it's unique in its community, and it's unique, unfortunately, because its property values are low, which make this whole exercise even more difficult. But overall, I agree with most of the people that the report here is a good report. I don't go back 15 years, so I'm not able to comment on plans that were put forward 15 years ago. What I am sure about is that we mustn't stop trying to regenerate Jaywick. That it needs to be done. And we may have gone around and round the houses, and to be honest, that's not a great thing, but if we need to go round a few more houses to get to where we need to get to, we need to get there. Most importantly, we need to get it right. And in order to get it right, one of the most important things we need to do is listen to the people who live there. Because as we know, nobody knows better about an area than the people who live in it. So I'm pleased we've done the consultation. I'm disappointed with the response level. And there's more to be done, quite clearly. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bray. Thank you, Councillor White. Much appreciated. Well, we have on page 44 a recommendation. Decides if he wishes to make any formal comments on the report, and B, subject to A, above notes the contents of the report. I would like to suggest to the committee that we ask for a paper on this very subject, same subject, to come back before this committee within the next 3 years. I think that's a fair timescale. I think that's reasonable, unless you think otherwise. And that also, for whomever our successors are on this committee, will then be able to relook at it, and maybe in that time, we could, as Councillor Bray so rightly said, we'll have gone around a few more houses, hopefully, that are built there, and come up with a better solution that we have in front of us at this moment. I think to condemn it or do either anything black or white, I don't think it's going to be conducive to the good running of this council, etc. Mr. Guyver.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to provide a bit of clarity and assurance, really, that
I'm asking Mr. Ford to write something at this moment.
Okay. That actually the intention is, from the findings of this consultation that we've reported to you tonight, is that actually this is the springboard from which we will be looking to produce a more detailed plan that will ultimately come before this committee for comment and consideration, and that we are looking to do that this calendar year. So at some
This
point,
coming year.
This coming year. Yeah.
All right. Well, the next financial year. We start in May.
Next financial year.
We're weird. We go from May to May.
So the members of the committee will be able to see at first hand the progress that has been made since this consultation.
I'm very pleased to hear that, Mr. Guyver. So on that basis, Mr. Ford, may I take your advice? Do you think we need to make an extra recommendation, as we're going to be getting another report and an update within the next, the first year of the next council?
Say not, Jim, because sorry, I would probably say not, Jim, because this committee will be seeing at some point the supplementary planning document and deciding whether it wishes to recommend it on to Cabinet for adoption. So there will be other opportunities for the committee to have its input before it reaches the final adoption stage.
Is that acceptable to everyone? Lovely, thank you. On that basis, then, may I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Fairley, may I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Chapman. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Unanimously carried. Passed. All right. Now we move on to number 8. Report to the Director of Planning, David Sands Design Guide Supplementary Planning Document. And again, I have the same team, Mr. Guyver.
Thank you, Chairman. So very much related and very much informed by the consultation feedback that we just described. We, as part of the consultation, we sought views on a draft version of the JVIC Sands Design Guide, which did come before this committee for its consideration. And whereas the place plan is the long-term strategy for rejuvenating and regenerating the area, the JVIC Sands Design Guide is a very practical and specific document that will sit alongside the local plan and to provide that guidance that we will use in the determination of planning applications, and the architects and property owners will be able to refer to when considering what they do with their properties in terms of future redevelopment. And as I think it was Councillor Allen said, the strategy, and I think Councillor White also mentioned it as well, the importance of trying to get people, raise them off the ground so that there's a degree of refuge built into properties. So if the flood did come and the defences weren't able to hold it, there is a degree of security built into the property itself. And what this design guide looks to do is to provide that guidance that people can refer to in creating that kind of property in the area. And it's very much aimed at looking at redevelopment of plots and groups of plots within the Jaywick Sands area. And I'll hand over to Hannah to go through some of the specifics, but I just highlight the recommendation early this time, because the recommendation here is that the committee recommends to Cabinet that we actually adopt this document as a supplementary planning document, and on adoption it will become a material consideration in the determination of all applications within that part of Jaywick Sands. So I'll hand over to Hannah to perhaps pick out some of the specific elements that she might want to raise.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, so as Gary mentioned, this is very much more of a technical document than the overall strategy, and it's been the subject of quite a lot of work with Environment Agency as well as with planning officer colleagues within the council, because it's very much aimed to address some of the challenges that they see with proposals that come forward in Jaywick Sands at a range of scales, whether that's relatively small scale proposals by householders, or whether that is more comprehensive development proposals that come up from time to time. As mentioned, we consulted with this alongside the other wider strategy, and I note the comments on the consultation. I think that we all, I'm mindful we didn't answer that question fully in the last one about the level of consultation response, but whilst we all would like to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses, I think that we did, in my view, get a pretty good response on both the consultations. I'm noting that we had well over 100 people come to events, and we had many dozens reply via online as well. And I think that does compare favourably to other planning policy consultations, which are not always the most scintillating of consultations for people. And noting that the draft DPD for the Garden Borders community got 193 people responding. I think it's not too bad to get over 100 in Jaywick. The SPD broadly was very well supported in terms of the principles. It does address a lot of the issues that members of the community brought up, notably the relationship between new development and existing homes, that there's support for building better quality homes that provide refuge and so forth for residents, but that shouldn't be at the expense of the amenity of their neighbours. So that shouldn't involve unnecessary overlooking, overshadowing and other amenity disbenefits to neighbours. And I think that has been one of the challenges that came up over some proposals over the recent past. One of the most substantive comments that was brought up by community members at the events was in fact around disabled access. And I think I'd just draw members' attention to that, because that's probably the most substantive alteration between the draft SPD that we consulted on and the final version that we are now putting forward for adoption, is some additional guidance around accessibility. And that derives directly from the concerns that community members raised around the difficulty of accessing living accommodation that is raised high up above the ground, when that access is in the open air, can be slippery, can be potentially a little bit dangerous for people with mobility issues, and also with young children and families, quite a difficult thing to do to go up steps. And I think that's really helpful feedback that we had from the community. Everything else was pretty much well supported by both community members and by the statutory consultees. We did get some statutory consultation responses, a few sort of minor matters of wording really to change, as you'll see in the schedule of changes. And we have clarified a few of the flood modelling points with the Environment Agency, because it turned out that they had given us slightly inaccurate data first time round, but that's been been corrected now, which is very good. So altogether, it is broadly speaking in line with the document you all saw previously at this committee and recommended for consultation, with that additional section on accessibility that's been added, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Loftus. Any questions, the officer? Sorry, our consultant? No. Right. Well, I will go. So I have been through this, of course. And I would like to point out, on the basis of the empirical evidence you produce for your things, I would not go to the polls on it. Right. That one there. When we look at, you're going to have to help me here, please. All the policies. The policy number. What's the first policy? Yeah, there we are. Hey. I'm working on page 8. I'll tell you what page it is on your agenda. I get these first, so I read these thoroughly and anoint my papers, and then I get the agenda. Yeah.
86.
86. Thank you very much, Mr. Ford. I notice it says there in but very classic. This is classic. Classic planning speak. New development must maintain a low-rise skyline on Jaywick Sands when seen from the surrounding rural areas, but taller buildings may be appropriate. So I shall leave that stand and allow the officers their fun and games on that one. The one I am drawing attention to is the fourth bullet point down, and I will take a comment from Councillor Casey if I've got this wrong. Visual separation between Tudor Estate and Village Brooklands grasslands should be maintained. I think that should be must be maintained. Yeah, if I take each item as a time, because there's several I've got, but I really do from my knowledge. I'll come on to you in a moment. Yeah, I'll ask you in a moment, if I may, Councillor Casey. But from my understanding and the work I have done, but it was some years ago in Jaywick, as it was then, I noticed there was a distinct difference between the two communities, and they wish to remain and stay that way, which is understandable. And therefore we'd need a green gap between the two, which is also so I was wondering if the committee thought about changing should to must. Yeah. Have you got something? Yeah, I think it'll be appropriate now. Yeah, I'll allow that. Would you come to the microphone, please, because we are broadcasting. This does not create a precedent, Mr. Ford. Thank you. Adjourning the meeting, I'm not closing it.
This was a letter that was given by Chairman of the Council, Mr. Mick Page, Councillor Casey and Councillor Nick Brown. These are to squash the false rumours over developing Tudor Meadows. GDC and Mick Page made it clear at Cabinet meeting today the Council has no wish to build on Tudor Meadows, despite rumours to the contrary. Council Page said that the recent exhibition, which attracted more than 400 people, resulted in a very positive feedback, which we are grateful. Now we will be faced with a potential change, have some concern about how it will affect them, and some inaccurate rumours are being circulated. I would like to put the record straight. Clearly, there are no plans to build on Tudor Meadows. That's the piece of land you're talking about. So, right. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Casey, for that comment. And as I said, it's not so much no land to be built on it, but there should be a separation between the communities. So that doesn't rule out development on those lands. It just means that they should not coalesce. Right. That's is that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think the should or must. There is a lot of difference in that.
Yeah.
And I thank Councillor Casey from Jaywick, the actual Jaywick councillor, for bringing his letter to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. I'm just right, page 26 to me. I'll do better homework next meeting. I'll do better. I get these first, but not as an agenda pack. And so constantly I do all my homework on 104. Thank you very much. I will make sure next time I've done some homework on the differential in pages. I had no comments on that. Any comments? No, right. Oh yeah, I do have a question, a query. This is on page 34. 112. Thank you, Vice Chairman. That's 3A, designing flood safety. The penultimate bullet point, designed to withstand the hydrostatic hydrodynamic pressures of flood water, so it will remain standing during flood conditions when refuge is relied on. My understanding is that the EA have done the work on that.
That's their typical requirements for.
Yeah, I know that, but they've done the work on it and got the data. I am going back a few years.
So it's down to the building designers to design to meet the water pressure required. Yeah. So the Environment Agency doesn't tell you how to do it. They just say you should do it. I think it's particularly noteworthy in Jaywick Sands because of the depths of floodwater. So obviously the engineering for that is more onerous the deeper the floodwater is in an area. So if you're only asking a building to withstand 200 or 300 millilitres.
Yeah, no, I understand all that. Yeah. But some years ago, I was asked, oh good God, back in the noughties, to go down and have a look at someone wanting to put an extension on their house in Grasslands. And I looked into it, and then they were going to be able to be acceptable to EA. They were going to have to produce this report. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they were typical of people living down there. He was a ticket collector and deliverer in Frinton Station, and she was a helper in a school. And they were expecting, I'm going back, as I said, 15 years, and they were expected to find £8,000 for a report. Now, I was given to understand at the time, and this is why I'm asking a question, that if you wanted to do that in Harwich, the EA had that information for Harwich, and it was in the public domain. But for Jaywick, it wasn't, and then they've had to advise a consultant, which is absolutely ridiculous to expect somebody to produce that sort of money and find that sort of money on top of a mortgage and the other professional fees, and what was the result of this? No development whatsoever, or redevelopment, or improving of properties in Jaywick. That was the result of that, and it was a deliberate policy done so. And that's why, hence my question are these, what that means for those uninitiated is when the water comes over, if God forbid it does, but we both think it will, when it comes over is what will be the likely volume at different heights, and also depending on the different weather systems, how much pressure that would then apply on the building, and would the building be able to stand up to it? It's in simple layman's terms, that's what this means. But that information, I can certainly find out from the EA if it is, but I was wondering if you knew.
Yes, the Environment Agency provide data to anybody who requests it, site-specific flood data, and that there's a blanket policy across the whole country. So they provide the various data sets. However, a site-specific flood risk assessment is required for any development within the zone of flooding, and that will require the applicant.
Yeah, I understand that, but you could actually. The point I was making was, I was informed. I said maybe wrongly. I don't know. I don't know. This is why the question. But certainly that information was free gratis to those living in the Harwich area, but not for those living in West Clacton.
No, it's the same. It's the same throughout, and you can get the data by request.
That's all I wanted to know, because as I said, I found it extremely unfair and not right. That's good. That's my comment there. 4A, nothing. 4B, nothing. Streetscape and and parking, I noticed one of the things I have discussed with Mr.
Page 116.
Thank you. I have discussed all this with obviously Mr. Guyver, and we have discussed it in depth and at length. But one of the things is, and of course, when we come to doing sill, maybe we can get that in, that part of any developer has to pay towards the cedar fences. For Jay, I mean, one of the problems is viability, is the money in the system. I accept that, but I do. But we can't do it. I'm informed that we cannot do it under present 106 agreements, which is a great shame. But I just thought I'd build that. And also the other thing is, right up my alleyway, is the Building Beautiful Commission to come in. So we won't be just putting up something that's utilitarian. We'll be just putting up something like that is going to be worthy of looking at for generations to come. 5A, 5B, I have no comments on. Or 6A, 6B. Regarding accessibility and your comments on the idea of freezing and such like, which happens very infrequently, by the way, next door to the sea. We have had it this year, but not much. I'll pass this round to you all. It is Essex Covered Stairway. I used to own one. One of the very few still left in Essex at the Sun Hotel in Dedham. It's still there. If you pass it on, there's a picture there from a sketch done from 1892, and me in my prime in about 1979, because it used to be my access to my flat. Well, vernacular, don't we always go on about building the local vernacular? So I'd like to pass that through to. And you're very welcome to keep those, Miss Loftus, or use them as scrap paper or whatever you wish. That's my only comment there. Yes, it is actually, yeah, 1979 with my brand new Ford Escort RS 2000. And I did drive it like that as well. Lovely car. Till the Golf GTI came out. That is all my comments on that. So anybody got any other comments on it? No, right. So with that, so that must rather than should be a separation between the two communities. Let's go back to our recommendation. Oh, yes, sorry, you're right. Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Bray, did you have any further comments on that?
No, Chairman, I'll leave that one for the committee to decide, and I'll probably see it again at Cabinet if you.
You will do, because we're only a working party too. Councillor White? No comment, right. So on that basis, are we prepared to accept the Jaywick Sands design guide as an SPD? Yeah, may I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Allen, and a secondary. Right. Thank you, Councillor Fowler. All those in favour, please show. You have an SPD. Thank you. Right, now we come on to, that's that one dealt with. And now we come on to. Everything okay? No, don't apologise. Everything all right? I'll just hold a moment, please. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Night. Oh, pleasure, Dan. Sorry, Councillor Casey, I'll be formal. Thank you, Councillor Casey. Lovely to see you here, and thank you for taking the time to come out on such a foul night. I'll see you tomorrow night. Good night. Right, at long last, Mr. Fuller, the floor is yours. And this is for the Brightlingsea Conservation Area, inland, I'm going to call it. Oh, yes, you're off high as well. Thank you, Miss Loftus. Night.
Thank you.
Safe journey home. This is the Brightlingsea Hall and All Saints Church Character Appraisal Management Plan. Mr. Fuller.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'll try and make this quick because it's the last item, and I think we kind of want. I want to go home, so let's let's do this. I'm going to miss the 8 o'clock train. It's gonna, So this is the Bromsey Hall All Saints Church Conservation Area. This is actually the 13th conservation area that we've had before this committee. So 13 out of 20, we're doing pretty good so far. And it's probably the smallest conservation area that Tendring actually possesses. It's 1 second, my notes have stopped. It follows a very similar formula to all the other conservation areas that we've seen so far. It begins with a generalised history of the conservation area from prehistoric times right up to modern day. It goes through the special character of the conservation area. Normally with the bigger conservation areas that breaks down to different character areas, but this is so small that it just has one particular character area, which is of a really, it's really of an ecclesiastic church, and then the hall itself and the outbuildings that go with that. So it's pretty compact. We are recommending, we and Place Services are recommending a change to the boundary, a very small change. We're going to include a couple of mid-19th century semi-detached properties, which are of quite good, quite a good example of their style. So that's the only real change there. Also, similarly to other conservation areas, it goes through key listed and key non-designated heritage assets. And for this conservation area, we're looking at the only listed building is the actual church itself. And then for non-designated assets, also known as the local list, we're proposing 2 properties, and that is the hall itself, and then the Lich Gate as part of the church, which is a post-World War, it's a post-World War timber structure. So and then it goes on to I'm going to skip over bits here, archaeology and bits and bobs, that's all pretty standard stuff. And then it goes to look at the issues of the conservation area, and like many conservation areas in the district, it kind of shares similar themes, things like parking, things like interpretation, and things like poor fenestration details, windows and doors, and inappropriate alterations, which are common to all conservation areas. So those are things which need looking at, and the way in which we're going to look at those kind of things is through sorting out. Is through accessing the council's own enforcement powers, through producing guidance notes for property owners. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it's off the record or not, but we've already started on producing leaflets to go around to different conservation areas for residents. Whether that actually kind of forms, we already have specific leaflets that deal with windows and doors, that deal with guttering, that deal with every part of a conservation area you could possibly want. Whether we actually redo those again, we may do, and that's one of the recommendations made. And then finally, I've been banging on about this for 2 years now, but the local list that we're preparing to put together, members will recall that we have sorted the criteria against which these buildings are going to be set, and we're hoping this year, probably in the spring, to begin a full-blown consultation of those local lists, and we're going to be asking parish councils to take on that as kind of like the parishes, they know their areas, so they can give us ideas of what these local buildings are going to be. Just one little final note on the way forward and what we're doing next. This committee did ask officers to review all 20 conservation areas within 18 months, which is coming up very shortly. So after this Brightlingsea conservation area is done, we've got Lawford and then Great Clacton to do. Those are the next. I'm expecting those on my desk imminently, and that'll be good because we've been kind of doing them in sets of 5, and so that means that in the last set of 5 to go up for consultation together, there'll be both they'll finish off the Brightlingsea ones. Both the Brightlingsea ones will be done. Both the Clacton ones will be done because there's 2 in Clacton, and then all of Manningtree, Misty and Lawford as an area will be done. So it'll be nice to get those 3 complete areas finished together. And then the last 5 conservation areas that we've commissioned from Place Services, the work is being done, the sites are being visited, they're writing the reports as we speak. They're the small villages, so I'm hoping that those last 5 are going to come before us pretty quickly, Chairman, and we'll get them all. Well, there is, and we'll get them all done hopefully before the end of this tax year. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions and comments. The recommendation is going to be at page 145.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fuller. Members, any comments? I'll go to you first, Councillor Chapman, if you have any.
Sorry, I'm just trying
No hurry,
to
no
quickly
rush.
skip back through it.
Yeah.
About listing of the employment area next to Brightlingsea Hall, well, it's sort of part of Brightlingsea Hall, and next door has now become quite a large employment area. You've mentioned the changing of the barn to, which is now an industrial unit. I haven't come across in here that it is listed now as an advised to stay as an employment area, or have I missed it?
Yeah, I think it will remain as an employment area. There's no proposals to change that. I think what the local listing is just looking at is the hall itself. So I think the barns aren't necessarily included in that, but they could be if residents or if the town council decides that that's what they want to happen. But yeah, the actual employment use isn't going to change.
Okay, thank you. So do you need the town council to actually write in to say we would like that put down as industrial or employment area?
I don't think that's really necessary. We aren't proposing to change that, and whether it's listed or not, that use won't change. So if the town council want to write to me and tell me that's fine. But I think the time for that really is in the local listing consultation that's probably going to take place springtime. So I think that it probably doesn't need doing, but if it does need doing, then in the spring is when they need to talk to me.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask why Brightlingsea has been split in 2? I know the church is, a grade 1, but we've got a grade 1 listed building in our high street. It just seemed, well, as I said to you, you cut off 20% of Brightlingsea in the original sum. Why was it never done as a whole policy?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And that kind of brings us to kind of potentially a wider point about how you designate conservation areas, because they need to be very, very precise, and you need to be able to be able to defend the entire thing in its entirety and say every part of it is historically important. So for the seafront, you have the maritime history, the shipbuilding. That has its own particular character. This bit in the north near the church, it's just really there because of the church itself. So I think when you look at if we were to say, well, we'll just designate the entire, all of Brightlingsea town, that'll be a great conservation area. Well, that would never hold up at examination, because the inspector would say to you, well, how is this little house here on this street here? How is that historically important? And you'd have to, as an officer, say, well, we just designated the entire thing, which wouldn't hold up. It wouldn't hold water.
I think the answer to your question is it gives you better protection.
Okay, it seems a bit of an odd way because of we've got so many grade 1 and 2 listed buildings leading right the way through Brightlingsea, nearly up to that church. So it does seem odd, but thank you anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Guyver.
Thank you. And just to add to what Mr. Fuller was saying, really is that the designation of a conservation area is very much focused on the conservation, protection and preservation of the buildings and features that sit within it, and that's almost completely independent of parish boundaries. It is very much about physically what's on the ground and concentrations of buildings and features that require protection. And what you will find is there are other examples in our district where this has happened. William gave the example of Great Clacton, which is very much focused on the historic the original historic core of Clacton-on-Sea. But the seafront of Clacton-on-Sea, which came along a lot later, is very separate from that and separated by a lot of sort of suburban development that's happened in the intervening years. And it wouldn't be appropriate to try and protect everything that's between those two areas, because, as the chairman rightly says, if you are robust and precise in what you protect, then the protection is greater, because it's not watered down by the fact that you've tried to include a load of other stuff in there that may be a bit more modern and might not have the characteristics of some of the more historic development. So Brightlingsea is not alone. Great Clacton seafront is another example where the areas are split up. Thorpe Soken and Thorpe Maltings, all in the same parish, but very much focused on two separate parts of that parish. So it's not unusual to see that.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Okay, fine. There is no other comments. The one comment I would like to ask the committee to consider is all our reports, and I notice them getting stronger and stronger, the recommendations in them from the police services at county. I'll come up with strong recommendations regarding the use of the panels. This is a thorny problem and one I have no suggestions for, except to say that we need to address this and offer some guidance to our ratepayers. Yeah, and on that basis, I'm very pleased to say that our recommendation to Councillor Bray, the portfolio holder, at our last meeting, that we go out with a leaflet with the rates payable demands 6 weeks' time, explaining to targeting those living in our 20 conservation areas, with a leaflet explaining the general leaflet explaining the responsibilities of living in said conservation areas. And I've had a draft here from Mr. Fuller, which I'm very happy to. I'm very satisfied with it. I think it answers all the questions. But obviously, I'll ask Mr. Fuller, or I could to send it around to you for your, if there's any comments on it before it goes out. And obviously for the portfolio holder to make a final decision on. But along that, we do have a, I think that's, yeah, I've recycled paper. We do have a blank side, and I do think, and I know I had this problem when I had the Maplin Hotel, where, and in that you cannot, if you've got a business in a conservation area, you have to go back to original. Unlike householders, they don't. That is still the case, I believe, Mr. Guyver.
Forgive me, I was just typing a note related to that, and you caught me out at the most inappropriate time. If you wouldn't mind repeating the question.
I'll repeat the question. I gather that businesses, as I was informed, God, nearly 30 years ago, have to comply when going back to original when replacing part of the fabric of a building, whereas homes don't. In that case, in my case, it was windows. Bearing in mind the windows had lasted 2 world wars, and God knows what the environment had been throwing at it for 80 odd years when it was built. And the windows were beautiful. They really were beautiful windows. I've never seen anything better than them. And I've lived in lots of properties over many hundreds of years, not of living in them, but of properties of age. And I could not replace them because they no longer made them, and they no longer made the profiles that small any longer. No steel mill could produce the actual steel. I had a bloke who used to sell most of the stainless steel in Britain staying with me, so I can lecture you on stainless steel if you need to know, if I can recall it. And you couldn't get them. So we then ended up by the UVPC eventually, after 2 years, dear old Dick Fletcher of long memory, suddenly relented a bit and said, here we are, here's some contacts for you. And I solved the problem. But I'm just thinking along those lines, I think it's only fair that if we're going to say you oughtn't to do this, that and the other, and it is oughtn't, then at least we can point people in the right direction. And that's just a thought that we could, which we can address at the final part of the meeting. In the meantime, we just suggest, so the recommendations are that A, endorses the new conservation area appraisal and management plan for Brightlingsea Hall and All Saints Church, recommends to Cabinet that the above document be published for consultation with the public and other interested parties. And C, notes that the conservation area appraisal and management plans for the district's remaining conservation areas will be brought before the committee in due course and before the new financial year. We I have a proposal. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Chapman and a seconder. Thank you. I'll take Councillor Allen this time. Thank Councillor Allen. All those in favour, please show. Right. And that is it. And I would, yes, that's it. And that, yes, I thank Councillor Bray for his comment on that. And I hope you'll consider what I said regarding finding some contacts or leading forward. And that doesn't include going to Natural England and Heritage Britain and such like, unless you've got heritage will only work if you've got grade listed building. And if you're the normal bog standard, reasonably well off person in a conservation area, you're going to have to put it from your own pocket. So it needs to be practical, I think, any comments we make. And I thank you all very much indeed. And it's exactly 2 hours. It is now 8 o'clock. Thank you all. Thank you. All right. That's good. Go on.